Hey, what up, jerks? Thank you for being patient. Just a couple minutes late. We're usually a couple minutes late, but we're all on time. The guest is here. I'm here. We're ready to go. But I was just having a little conversation with our guest backstage, and it was just very interesting. First time I've ever talked to her. I think we're going to have a great show tonight. I'm looking forward to this. Very exciting. You know that we've had a lot of big guests on this show. Retired FBI, retired DEA, U.S. Senator Ed Markey, other four Congress reps, a bunch of big name people on the show in the past, state senators, mayors. But this is a first tonight. It's not the first time I'm ever going to interview someone who is a retired judge, but it's the first time on the Young Jerks. And this show's been going for a long time. So, when we have a first time guest, it's always exciting. But this is the first time ever that you're going to see a retired judge on the Young Jerks. And I'm excited about who it is because she's from Massachusetts. She's written a great book that we're going to talk about. It's pinned in the chat if you want to buy it. Proceeds go to charity. She kind of messaged me. She hit me up after one of the Better shows about Kelsey Fitzsimmons. So as soon as I heard that and she had an interest in maybe discussing this, I immediately said, "Hey, will you come on the show and say this?" She's a retired. I want to say it right. I'm not going to screw it up. I'm just going to say she's a retired Massachusetts judge, and she can tell us where she served and all that. Welcome to the show, Judge. Yes, we got it right. Judge Carol Erskine. How
You
you doing
got it.
tonight, Carol?
Good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. Really appreciate it.
I'm very excited for this. This is going to be fun having a local like yourself who is a retired judge, and specifically you dealt with a lot of children cases, right? Like, where were you a judge at?
Right. I was the first justice of the Worcester County Juvenile Court. So that's like the head judge there's one for every county. They call them first justices. And so I sat in Worcester, but I also sat one day a week out in Milford. Worcester's a very busy court. And of course, in the juvenile court, the cases that we hear are criminal cases, delinquency cases, juvenile crime, youthful offender cases, which are kids who have been indicted and can be sentenced as juveniles or as adults. And uh, uh, Continuing with child requiring assistance cases, which are runaways, sexually exploited kids, truants, kids who have um, struggles, mental health struggles, that kind of thing. And then the majority of cases that I heard were child abuse and neglect cases called care and protection or termination of parental rights. And of course, we heard adoptions if kids were freed for adoption. And those cases really involved kids who were either physically abused, broken bones, fractured skulls, broken ribs, um, sexually assaulted kids, kids who were uh, living with parents who had severe substance abuse issues and neglect issues, kids who were left alone. I had 4 or 5 cases where there was a murder suicide with the parents, leaving kids, essentially orphaned and having to come before the court. Loads and loads of domestic violence cases, leaving kids in danger. So when I left 2.5 years ago, when I retired from the bench, under my jurisdiction, along with the 4 other judges that were there, we had, I think, 1,130 open child abuse cases in our court. So it was a busy court. It was Worcester, so the criminal cases, there were lots of misdemeanors, but we also did a lot of dangerousness hearings because there were a lot of firearms cases and gang activity. So that was pretty much my life for 20 years. It's a lot to hear, but it's also a court where maybe you can bring out some good, maybe something good can happen.
Many years of protecting kids. I mean, that's the big focus there, right?
That's it. It's all about protecting kids, doing the right thing for families, and you know, it's uh, it's definitely a high pressure kind of job because you're just hearing things like you're not in trial, You're just hearing emergency petitions with DCF coming in saying, we have a child who's been left alone for a day and a half. We don't know where the parents are. I had a few starvation cases. I also had some cases involving removal of life support where a child was deemed to possibly be brain dead but was on life support, where we had to make decisions about that. It's a lot of very serious stuff. And so it does weigh pretty heavily. It certainly does. It's very serious stuff. It's very important kinds of cases.
Now, you've recently written a book. Have you written a couple books, or is this your first book?
Well, my first book was a children's book, which I wrote. It's called The Scary Cloud Monster, and I wrote it because when I was putting kids in foster care, I wanted them to believe that that they were smart and that they could make great decisions and that they were the heroes. And so, The Scary Cloud Monster is a story. Well, I wrote it when my kids were little because they wanted scary stories, and it's about kids who, on a first sunny day, this ferocious, scary cloud comes, this monster cloud, and essentially they figure out using their science knowledge how to take care of this. So I would order the books from the publication company, and then I would give it to kids in foster care. So my second book is actually coming out next week. It's called The Scary Snow Monster. Similar science-based, a fun activity in the book, and a link to NASA climate. But the book that you're talking about is the reason that I'm just finally getting my second children's book out, and that's the story of Harmony Montgomery, A Cruel Injustice. And uh, um, I came to be very involved in this case because I was the judge who did the finalization of the adoption of Harmony Montgomery's brother. And as we all know, Harmony was brutally murdered. They've never found her body. And I had gotten to know the two dads of Harmony's brother before I did the adoption. I met them in 2017 when Blair Miller, who was a reporter in Boston and is now the evening anchor in Atlanta, spoke at National Adoption Day, and I met Blair and Jonathan and their two boys, and they were amazed about these kids that were in foster care and needed a home. And I just said to them, you could probably take another child, right? Here's my card. Call me if you're ever interested in how to get through the licensing process. To my surprise, they called a year later. We've been friends ever since. And Jameson came into their home as a foster child. And then the Chief Justice allowed me. His case was in Boston. He's Harmony's half brother, but they were very close when they were in foster care or at home. And they have to Jameson knows that Harmony is not alive, but he doesn't know how she died, and he's only just 8 years old, and this all happened when he was 5. So they asked me what happened, and so I decided to take the report from the Office of the Child Advocate, break it all down, and then expose the system, the secret system of the juvenile court, and that's what I did. And it gave them some peace of mind. They did 4 chapters in the book where I asked them questions, which was new to me. It was kind of like being a reporter, which isn't exactly my strong suit. But in 4 chapters, they answered these questions about their life with their boys and Jameson and how they're dealing with it. And so, it's out there. It's actually it'll be 1 year tomorrow that we launched the book. It's done very well, and we all made an agreement, the 3 of us, to donate all the royalties to the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, which helps find homes for kids that are stuck in foster care because they have disabilities or others or their siblings or older kids. So that's what we've been doing. I think I've sent 3 royalty checks to Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and they come every quarter. So so that's the story of the book.
Amazing. That's great to put it to kids, to help kids out. And we have it pinned in the chat right now. So if anyone wants to check out the book, we have it pinned. It's a cruel injustice. It's on Kindle, Amazon. You can get paperback. It's also on Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere. You could find this book everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's on Barnes and Noble. It was interesting because they actually had hard copies of it in the local Barnes and Noble, so which I hadn't
Nice.
seen before because mostly, you can buy it online. So it was good to see that because it's sold out there in the local one here. But yeah, thank you very much for that. It's my story in a way of getting the secrets out. And there was a lot of pushback, I will tell you that, from inside the secret court system. People did not want me to tell the story about how it all works and how the legal system that represents children is entirely broken, and how it was the legal system and what happened during that hearing that's responsible for sending Harmony with her father, who 9 months later brutally murdered her. And so I have since concentrated on the New Hampshire case and how they left Harmony with her father, even though they were well aware they had 17 child abuse and neglect cases filed in New Hampshire, totally ignored by the department. And in my frustration that they would not recognize what happened, I tell the story in three parts on my website, The Justice File, and it's a stunning story. And so I wrote a 40-page petition to the U.S. attorney in New Hampshire and to the FBI with 110 factual allegations, and then detailing the law, and put it out there in a press release, and got a call from the FBI. I had met with the FBI, providing them with the evidence, and asking the U.S. attorney to file criminal charges under federal law for violating Harmony's rights. So that's where that stands. So we'll see what
Can
happens.
you say that again, Carol? It broke up a little bit with what the FBI is doing. The FBI called you after you put that out?
Yeah, I put out a press release saying that I was going to file a complaint with the FBI about how Harmony's case was ignored. She was beaten on July 22nd, and her uncle called, and she had a very severe black eye. This came out at trial. And what happened is the social worker basically told the supervisor and the police, don't go and see her. I saw her and she didn't have any black eye. But of course, we came to know during the trial, when he couldn't lie, that he never saw her that day. And it has since come out that the social worker was actually Adam Montgomery's youth counselor when he was in detention in New Hampshire, and then was assigned to the case where it was alleged that he physically abused Harmony. And then for 3 months, he had the open case. Harmony was left at home, even though reports were coming in. But they never let her see like a doctor or anyone that was a mandated reporter ever. They didn't put her in school. And then in October of 2019, DCYF in New Hampshire wrote saying, we find the allegations unsupported. There was no abuse. That was October 5th. 7 weeks later, he beat her to death. So I was incensed about this, and I drafted a complaint for civil rights violations under the criminal federal statutes, and put a press release out there. Got a lot of publicity on local Boston stations, especially in New Hampshire. And I let everybody know I was going to drop the petition off at the FBI in New Hampshire the next day. And they called me that morning and said they would meet with me, and I did meet with them. I went through the petition. I sent a copy to the U.S. Attorney for New Hampshire, and now it's up to them to determine whether or not they'll move ahead with some civil rights violations. So a lot's still happening with Harmony, and at the heart of this, and I'll tell everybody that at the heart of this is a little boy who, when he came to live with Blair and Jonathan, would run in the park if there was a little girl there when she was missing. When they said she was missing before they knew she was murdered, she had been missing for 2 years. They didn't find out until 2 years too late. And he would run up to kids in the park, if they had blonde hair, glasses, and say, "Are you my sister?" Or if the doorbell rang, he would say, "Harmony's coming to visit." So, she was very important to his life. And so, um, you know, that's, that's why we've been advocating. I think, as you mentioned, we talk back and forth, our message back and forth. I called Senator Moore. We worked on legislation to create a commission to really look at how the system failed, and had some trouble getting it through. Although this time it's making some progress. I've been working with Senator Moore for 3 years, and he's just fabulous to work with.
Takes so much time, unfortunately, to get something done. I mean, it's just you'd think that this would be at the forefront, considering the press it got.
Yeah, you'd like to think so, but the state of Massachusetts wants to. I always say they want to put Harmony in the rearview mirror, and I say that purposefully because her father was driving the car and she wet her pants, which of course that she had been severely abused, and she was in the back seat of the car and he just kept beating her in the head over and over again until she moaned and
Jeez.
then stopped breathing. And then took her out of the car and put her in an underarm bag, and then destroyed her remains over a period of 3 months, and won't tell anybody where it is. It's a very sad story, and it's very difficult, I'm sure, for people that are listening to listen to. But I always give people the cold hard facts because it's we're hoping someone will listen. I will tell you this: I sent a copy to the DOJ in Washington D.C., and they sent me a letter saying, that they kind of sort of indicating that there were issues, child welfare issues, and they sent it to HHS, they sent it to Health and Human Services, said for action. So a lot of things are going on, and I hope to get somewhere, and I think Blair and Jonathan, who are two most remarkable people and remarkable dads I've ever met, I'm hoping um,
I hope so. I gotta
to
say
come.
too, like helping some victims in the past. Sometimes it just does take time. It takes years and years, but like you said, when the feds are looking into it, I know for the workers that we were champion, it took the feds a few years, but they started looking into it, and slowly but surely things can change. So I hope all of you keep on this and just keep pushing. Um, it does look like we're having a little bit audio issue with your feed right now, Carol. Carol, I'm wondering if sometimes if we have you start back up, are you able to maybe just we'll remove you and bring you back up on the screen?
Yeah,
Do you know how to
sure.
do that?
I'm using earbuds, so maybe I can take them off and just use the computer audio. Do you think that will
We could
help?
try that. We could try that.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll
Let me.
remove you from the screen for a minute, and then we'll bring
Okay.
you back up, and you can work on that, and we'll see maybe if it gets
Okay.
better. And if not, the
Okay.
other option we can sometimes is turning off the video. Sometimes that just makes the audio much better. And if there's
Okay.
an internet issue, sometimes that alleviates it too. So
Okay.
we'll try that.
Let me try that.
All right. With Carol, Erskine, she's a retired judge. It's been a fascinating interview so far. We're definitely going to talk about Kelsey Fitzsimmons, but if you can, check out her book. It's pinned in the chat right now. A Cruel Injustice. It goes to charity. The proceeds, their royalties. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's a Kindle edition. There's a paperback. We have it pinned in the chat right now. I'm going to bring Carol back up and let's see if this works any better. Looks like you're muted right now. You want to try on muting and we'll see if that works? There you go. Nope. We still have you on
There we
mute,
go.
Carol. There you go.
How's that? Can you
That
hear
sounds
me?
better. I
Yeah,
think that sounds better.
good. I took the buds out, so we'll use the computer audio and hopefully that'll work better.
Perfect. I think that did it.
Great.
So yeah, we've been talking about harmony. What is this bill that you're talking about? Because it would create a committee, a commission. What
Yeah,
would that do? How would that work?
we named it the Harmony Commission, and it would put people on this commission, judges and some lawyers and even people in the public, foster parents and people like that, you know, in order to look at what went wrong with case and what goes wrong in cases like that. One of the most concerning things I think, one of the most concerning things I think that I wrote about is the fact that in Massachusetts, when you have parents who are accused of abuse or neglect, if they're indigent, they get appointed attorneys from the Committee for Public Counsel Services. And one of the things I write about and always had an issue with is that all of the lawyers that are appointed on the case, the mother's lawyer, the father's lawyer, the child's lawyer, are all paid for by CPCS. Some of them are private lawyers, some of them are full-time salaried, but they all work for the same organization, the Committee for Public Counsel Services. So in Harmony's case, the father wanted custody. Supposedly, the mother was actually in another court on Jameson's case, and supposedly, according to her lawyer, she agreed for the father to have custody. She absolutely denies that. And then the child's counsel basically took the position that this is what Harmony wanted. Harmony was 4 at the time. And she said, well, Harmony wants to be with her father. She took that position and then never presented evidence of his dangerous criminal record where he shot someone in the head, pushed someone out of a car, stabbed someone, had a 10-year history, violent history. The child's attorney never put that into evidence. Nobody put it into evidence. And the child's attorney basically took the position that Harmony should go with the father. They never presented evidence that he had only seen her 20 times in her entire life because he was in jail for the first year and a half, that he didn't comply with services, that he didn't do a psych evaluation, all of that. None of that was presented to the judge. And so, you know, they all took the position, and DCEF did a really poor job of presenting the case. And so Harmony went with her father, and within 4 or 5 months, he was punching her in the head, having her scrub floors with a toothbrush at age 5, sitting in a corner for hours at a time, you know. And so, you know, I'm anxious to have a commission appointed, the legislature, to look at the system that essentially put her there because the legal system is so dysfunctional in Massachusetts for the representation of children. And they don't always put a guardian ad litem or a best interest advocate on for children. I did a lot as a judge, I would say. I'm hearing the lawyers say, I think this child should be at home. And I would say, yeah, well, you know, I'm going to appoint a guardian ad litem, you know, to basically see whether or not I agree with that. So that's what the commission's all about.
Why did they allow that? Why didn't they show all that evidence? Why would they not care about this little child? I mean, that just...
Yeah, because, you know, it's all about winning. And, you know, the Committee for Public Counsel Services has this notion that children should be with their parents. And, you know, when Harmony went missing and the story exploded countrywide, you know, they made a comment. Their comment was, you know, you can't, you know, we're still going to do things the same way. They said, sad facts make bad law, you know, which is kind of an expression. So in my book, I was so angry about it. I said, here are the sad facts. And then I listed testimony from the trial about how he beat her and how he kept, you know, beating her in the car. And then I said, sad facts. So, yeah, I haven't endeared myself to a lot of, you know, the child welfare and legal community that hears these cases. That's for sure.
How do you make that decision between what this person's posting here, Sarah Creative, the family reunification line, versus this is not good for the child? Like, obviously, in this case, to me, it's cut and dry with the record. The record was there. How do you ignore that? But I think sometimes it maybe goes the other way against a parent that maybe should get a second chance with a child, with maybe they have drug and alcohol issues and they're trying to straighten their life out. How is a judge supposed to make those decisions, and how is the system kind of failing to make those decisions correctly? Because I think the welfare of the child has to be that Harmony should have never been in that situation. It's clear.
Right. You would think that it works that way, but it doesn't, because even though the courts in their cases say best interest is, they always use this expression, cognate and connected is the expression they would always use. And they would say, oh, well, let's cognate and connected, meaning that best interest is right along there, but parental rights supersede the best interest of the child, even in case law. And so there, unless there's proof by clear and convincing evidence that the parents are unfit, then you return the child. Well, sometimes that's appropriate, as you say. Some substance abuse cases, parents, get rehabilitated. They do really well. In Harmony's case, they sent Harmony back with the mother 3 times, and she relapsed every time. So, it's all based on the evidence, and which requires a lot of careful review by a judge. I was always, like every judge, very careful about these cases. But Harmony's case, when it came to what was called a review and redetermination to see if Harmony, she was in foster care for 4.5 years, they only presented evidence of the father testifying, nope, I've rehabbed, I'm doing well, I have a home to live. No one in that courtroom, even the governor said, there were a lot of lawyers in the room, and not one of them had Harmony's best interest in mind. So they just didn't present the evidence to the judge. And tons of people were blaming the judge, but the fact of the matter is, I was a judge. If people don't put the evidence in front of you, you can only decide based on the evidence that is in front of you. So, yeah, so that's the story of Harmony. And thank you for asking about it, because, one of the reasons I limit what I do in terms of podcasts or core TV, but one of the reasons that I do some of it is to kind of keep that story out there, because the state of Massachusetts and the trial court system that I worked in for years, they don't like it. They're unhappy, that I'm out there talking about this. And that's exactly why I'm out there talking about it. And I think I told you, as we're going to talk about Kelsey Fitzsimmons, I rarely comment on stuff like this, but sometimes you just have to, because it's the right thing to do.
Unfortunately, people aren't. Not everyone's gonna like it, unfortunately, but that usually means you're doing something right, because you kind of poking the system. The system doesn't like to be corrected, but sometimes that's what it takes to bring some correction. So
Right. Yeah. It's I've been called a rogue judge by some, and I got a lot of pushback from the book. I also got a lot of really important information out there, and I've had a really good response to it, and that was my goal. It's just like you say, you're not going to make everybody happy. I knew when I wrote the book that wasn't going to make everybody happy. I knew there would be pushback from the system that I worked in for 20 years, but I was prepared to do that, especially for Blair and Jonathan.
looks like girl Ryan. She said, "This is so interesting. Thank you, Judge Erskine. I just bought the book." So apparently, some people are buying the book, and some money's going to go to help kids with adoption, kids that are hard to place. I love that when you mentioned
Yeah.
what it does, because there are older kids, there are kids with handicaps, there are
Yes.
kids that aren't as, let's just, desirable. Like everyone
Yeah.
wants the young baby, right? Like the young beautiful baby, the perfect
That's
baby.
right.
But
That's
if
exactly
it's,
right.
yeah, same thing with,
Yeah.
I'm in dogs. I work with, I do a lot of dog walks, dog sitting, and the same thing with the adoption of dogs. Like nobody wants an older dog,
Yeah.
which I end up adopting. Like
Oh, good
we've
for
done it.
you.
I mean, that's what I love some of my customers too, that will adopt older dogs just because of that reason. Like, so I love this charity that you're doing, and it's great that you're giving all the royalties to help the kids get adopted.
Yeah, and they're a great foundation, the Dave Thomas Foundation. And thank you, girl Ryan, for getting the book. It really does help. It's a tough read. You can only read a little bit at a time. There's a lot of law in there, but I'm explaining the system. So, but I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
But we can help, and uh, people can also call their state reps and state senators too to help ask them to sign on to this bill to come up with a commission, the Harmony Commission, right?
Yes, thank you so much. If you're in Massachusetts, send a note to your state rep or your state senator saying that you support the Harmony Commission, because it does make a difference when they hear from you. And the person that's the head of the Child and Family Committee, who just made sure that the bill got out of that committee, is Senator Robin Kennedy, Robyn Kennedy. You can send her, she's very responsive, and you can let her know we support this, because she'll push for it harder. She's been really helpful. And of course, Senator Moore, who wrote the bill. He's absolutely wonderful. So yeah, thank you for that. It's extremely helpful.
Excellent. I'm gonna talk to it's funny, sometimes I see my state rep walking her dog. We walk I have a customer that lives near her, so I'll run into her and I will ask her. Her name's Jenny Amini. So when I see Jenny again, I'm gonna ask her about the Harmony Commission. Hopefully I'll be out there walking dogs together.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That
And I
would be
hope people
great.
do the same when because we do, people who are the viewers watching, that a lot of you I know see your local state reps at parades or local parties and things like that. So this is something you can ask them when you see them in person, but even better, you can call them or email them and ask them, hey, are you going to support this? Why aren't you? Please support this Harmony Commission. It's not hard for them to vote on it. So I hope people ask their state reps and state senators.
Thank you
Um,
so much. That's so helpful. I don't think you know how helpful that is, but
Oh, I
thank
mean,
you.
this is what we're here for. This is what we love to do, and I'm thankful for you. Like you're the great guest to have to talk about the. It's much harder for me to do this type of show on my own. So you don't even. We're thankful for you. You're amazing, and to have a judge here. I know you're retired, and you say call me Carol, but for us it's pretty impressive to have you here talking about these issues and know you still care, you're still into this, and you're trying to help out, which is I just wish more public like ex officials would do that. I feel like a lot of times people when they leave the system they're done and they just go to Martha's Vineyard and you never hear from them again when they
Right.
know there's a lot of issues that they could be helping from maybe from the sidelines instead of you know um, and you're doing that. I really appreciate you doing that. Like support the Harmony Commission. That's the big thing in the chat right now. I hope people do that. Um, One of the things you hit me up about was Betterow. We had Betterow on the show, and Betterow and I were talking about Kelsey Fitzsimmons and the way that this judge, I think, in the hearing, treated Kelsey and the issues that she was having with breathing into the tube. We discussed that heavily. What do you want to say on this? Because I know you had messaged me about it and you had viewed it. What do you want to say about the Kelsey Fitzsimmons
Yeah,
situation?
when I messaged you, I just, I think I was just saying thank you for doing that, because I think Mark Betterow, said a lot of it well. So, it wasn't with the intent of, because I wasn't really doing many podcasts, but you were kind enough to ask if I wanted to do it. I had to think about it a little, but I'm certainly happy to be here. I think I was really concerned when not only listening to you and Mark, but just because it had been making the news, I just decided to sort of listen to what was going on in that hearing. I mean, when you're a judge, there are rules, and people think, well, a judge can do almost anything. Well, I guess you can try, but the appeals court is always there. And there are rules, judicial ethical rules that you have to live by. And, it's frustrating for me. I think a lot of people that, see your podcast know that I was on Lawyer and talked about what I viewed as the dichotomy between the rulings of Judge Cannone on experts put forward by the prosecutors versus experts put forward by the defense, and whether I thought the decisions, were reflective of a neutral arbitrator. And, at the time, what I said is, look, I mean, judges have a lot of discretion, but just because you have discretion doesn't mean you can use it in a way as the Supreme Judicial Court would say, and you cannot abuse your discretion. And, I just the whole, I mean, I don't have anything to say about the actual Fitzsimmons case. It is what it is. It's a terrible situation. She's, the grand jury has indicted her for assault with a dangerous weapon. And so that it is what it is. Nothing is more dangerous. I will say this in general about domestic violence cases and serving restraining orders. Nothing's more dangerous for police than when they're serving a restraining order. I mean, one of the things I do since I've been retired, aside from this advocacy, I do two things. I teach constitutional law in a criminal justice program. And the other thing that I do is I do trainings for police officers. And 6 times a year with a partner who's a former police chief and also an attorney, we do this training on advanced domestic violence training for police officers. And, just meeting all these police officers and understanding how dangerous these cases are, you can just imagine how dangerous that case must have been, because they're serving a restraining order, already dangerous, and you were serving it on someone who's trained in using a weapon and has a weapon in hand. So, I don't really comment on the facts because the facts will play out the way they're going to play out. But, serving restraining orders is probably one of the most dangerous things that can actually ever happen. What was concerning to me, and the reason that I messaged you saying thank you for, saying I think what a lot of people were thinking, is just frankly the way that case was handled. And so, it boils down to that there are procedures in place and they're there for a reason. And so you have Kelsey Fitzsimmons, who was released on bail. And from what I can understand, listening to the judge's comments, she had been originally released on bail and released under, there are 2 ways people can be released when they're at an arraignment. One is under Chapter 276, 58A, which is the bail statute. And if they're released, and the judge mentioned this, well, I released her under 58A, Section 2. And Section 2 is the section that tells judges, if you're going to release someone, you can make orders. You can make orders for drug and alcohol testing. You can make orders, for a bracelet, or you can make orders for a curfew, and it sort of lists these things that you can make orders. And I've done that 1,000 times, if not more. Release someone on bail and say, you're on a curfew, no drugs or alcohol. You're going to have drug testing. You have to stay away from the victim. I mean, I've done that thousands of times, and then. Also, I've released on the second way that you can release someone is under Chapter 276-87, which is called pretrial probation, which is a little bit more monitored by probation to see whether or not the person's complying. So let's say someone violates the biggest violation you can have is if you commit another crime or you're charged with another crime while you've been released on bail or on pretrial status. That's the big violation. Every other violation is really, they call them technical violations. Like you had a positive drug screen, they bring it back. I had that thousands of times. Well, judge, he tested positive for marijuana. He's 15 years old, can't smoke marijuana. That's a technical violation, as opposed to, well, judge, he's been arrested and now charged with assault and battery, dangerous weapon. And then, so what can happen on either of those cases is that they come in and they're given notice. You are hereby notified that, that there's of a potential violation. And so when there's a violation, you have to give them notice, and there's a certain number of days that are required. And then once that notice comes in, you're essentially arraigned on it. They come in and it's like, you're hereby notified of this revocation. A judge during that time can say, I'm going to hold you until there's a bail revocation hearing, or I'm going to release you on the same terms, and then we're going to have a hearing. What bothered me about this case is like none of that happened. I mean, I couldn't see anything that happened in that case because that case went in on a motion. So the motion was by her counsel, saying one of the conditions of release was that she used the alcohol testing scram, right? I think it was, to test for
Yep.
alcohol. So, first of all, I mean, they agreed to it, but, I thought that was interesting because, really under case law, you really can't be testing people for drugs and alcohol unless and set that condition, unless it's related to sort of the underlying charges, or there's been evidence presented to a judge, individualized evidence, that would make it reasonable to order drug and alcohol testing. I mean, that was different in the juvenile court because they call it parens patriae. You're sort of like a parent, so you can order drug testing. Lots of times parents would say to me, I want you to drug test them, and I could do that even though the crime wasn't related to that. But in the adult world, you can't really do that. So that was my first issue, but they had accepted that anyway. What bothered me about this is they come in and they're in front of a judge, and they haven't been given notice that I heard. I don't know if you heard, like, did someone say, you are hereby notified, that this is a revocation hearing. Supposedly it was a 58A hearing. So in other words, there are two ways, as I said, that people can be released. And so if you're released under 276-87 in pretrial status, you have to consent to the conditions. And then if there's a violation, it's up to probation to bring it forward. Probation files it, you bring it in, you're given notice, there's an arraignment on the violation, and then it's set for a hearing. If there's a violation under 58A, let's say the district attorney asked for, let's say the district attorney had asked for these conditions and was in agreement with bail, and there's a revocation, the district attorney can bring it forward to the judge saying, we want the bail revoked. This person has violated the conditions. I didn't hear either of that. I didn't hear either one of those things happen, So,
yeah, definitely not.
It's process, it's not only process, it's not only court process, it's due process. And so, for me, and as I think people knew in the in the Reed case, when I would comment saying this is a Sixth Amendment violation, and being very concerned about the constitutional rights of people connected to the system and teaching con law, this is a due process 14th Amendment issue. You're entitled to the basis of due process. Procedural due process is notice and opportunity to be heard. I just didn't see that, so I just found it very frustrating that they are there saying, look, all they were doing was asking for a modification of the terms of release, which people do all the time. People would come in and say, Judge, can we have a modification of the bracelet because my client needs to go to therapy, and, you set the time that it has to be home from school and the therapy's at 6 o'clock, and you modify it. Well, of course, sure. Of course, I'm going to modify it. That's all they were asking for. They're saying, look, she can't do the scram. She's doing it, but she's not registering it. So,
Exactly.
I was frustrated about that, not only about the process, because they were just asking for a modification. And I couldn't understand why she wouldn't agree to the modification. I just couldn't understand it, for a number of reasons. First, and I think because I think maybe Mark might have talked about this. What was really interesting to me is that here they are just saying, hey, we want to be upfront with you because we don't want there to be a violation filed.
Yeah.
So we want to be just upfront with you, Judge, and let you know that she can't do this, and can she do a urine screen instead? What could be more reasonable than that? I couldn't find anything more reasonable. Like if I was the judge sitting there, and yes, I don't, people maybe say, oh, well, she's sort of criticizing this judge. Well, I'm just saying I would have maybe done things different. But what I strongly disagreed with was that it seems to me that it just didn't follow the normal procedure that everybody's entitled to. It seemed like a due process violation to me. And then they asked for this very reasonable thing. And they have affidavits with them, saying that based on her injuries, right, that she can't, you have to be able to blow hard into the breathalyzer, into the scram in order to register it, right? And so they're saying, look, we have affidavits here. And then the probation officer, right, stands up and says, we've looked into this, we've kind of talked to her doctors, we don't find any violation. So even if there was a violation, the probation officer says there's no violation.
He said she was in compliance. He said she was in compliance.
Right.
There was never any non-compliance. She did everything she was supposed to.
And what happened? They didn't file a violation, right? The probation
No, they
officer.
did not. No, he actually wrote an email. The probation officer wrote an email that they used in this filing. The probation officer. It's funny because I was there the day she got released, and I talked to her outside and this is what she was talking about. She was saying, I don't know how I'm going to breathe in that tube. The probation officer and I tested it. Probation knows that I'm having a problem. I'm having a problem breathing into this tube. And she has 2 broken ribs, severe. This is what it said in the court filing: severe lung damage, diaphragm damage, and liver damage.
Yeah.
And
And
that paperwork's been filed before. Like, the court knows that she got shot. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like maybe she didn't have a direct note from the doctor that said she can't breathe in this tube, but she hasn't had time to do that. Like, she's supposed to stay at her house. There's a lot of issues here, but it's wild. I wonder, why do you think this judge did that, considering all that there wasn't a due process, that the probation officer said she was in compliance? Why would she do that? Like, what is, that's what we're all wondering. Why?
I can't fathom it, because, when probation officers would say to me, hey, Judge, this kid's in compliance, maybe I had some issues or whatever, but, you have to trust the probation officers, because they're right there dealing with these people. And they had affidavits, from doctors. So I think I mentioned this to you, and I don't think I've ever said it on any podcast or anywhere, because, only people that know me personally know this. But, I went to law school when I was 31. Prior to going to law school, I was a tenured community college professor teaching cardiopulmonary anatomy and physiology in a respiratory therapy program, because I started my young life at 20 years old as a respiratory care practitioner. I worked in intensive care units, took care of patients who were injured or whatever, who were on life support systems, worked in pediatrics. And so I never really tell people that, but if there's anything that I know a lot about, and there's lots of things I don't, like I can't even do my own taxes because I have like no math abilities. But if there's anything that I know a lot about, it's cardiopulmonary anatomy and physiology. And so when I looked at the list of things, fractured ribs and lung damage. Not only was it lung damage, she had a hemothorax on both sides, which means that because of the gunshot, blood started to fill the space between the lungs and the chest wall. That's what a hemothorax is. And she had broken ribs, which take a long time to heal. And on top of it, she had damage to the diaphragm, and the diaphragm is the muscle that you have to use in order to breathe out or blow. That's the muscle that you have to use. So it's inconceivable to me, knowing that information and having been presented that information. And when they asked for the motion for reconsideration and had the surgeon say she had a hemothorax, she had liver damage, she had ribs problems and fractures. And I'm shocked that the judge says, well, I'm going to get off the bench for a few minutes and then I'll come back. And then she comes back and says, I'm going to deny. I just don't see it. And that's one of the reasons, that I'm talking about this case. I will say this, Mike. Judges have discretion. You can do a lot as a judge. Like there were times when I would have a kid in front of me that I was really concerned about, and DCF would say, well, we're not asking for custody. We're going to leave this child at home. And I'm thinking, this kid's 12 years old. I have a lot of concerns. I'm gravely concerned. So I would say, you know what, I'm going to issue a sua sponte, the Latin version of I'm doing this on my own motion. So I'm going to sua sponte, order a care and protection petition, and I'm ordering custody, and I'll have a hearing in a day or in 2 days. So you can do a lot, but what concerned me about this is there's still a process. There's still the whole due process element, and I couldn't understand One, you have a prosecutor who's not asking for the bail to be revoked. The probation officer saying, don't revoke it, she's in compliance. And the judge, out of nowhere, you're asking me to explain, I don't know. I don't know. I think if it were appealed, that it might be that they find, in order to overturn a judge, they have to find that you abused your discretion in some way. But I don't know, and just the tone of some of the things, I think you if you were there, you probably heard, there was sort of this tone of like, don't interrupt me, I think to
Totally.
one of the lawyers, I'm not talking to you. I mean, to me, all judges are different, I'm not going to say I didn't ever lose my cool, but, when you're hearing this stuff, I'm not going to say I was like just charming, all the time, sometimes, you're firm and saying, hey, counselor, I'm not buying that you're taking this position that you're going to send this baby home after what happened here. You're like, I'm just not in agreement with you, step out, whatever. But this was different, I thought. I don't know what you thought, but I thought the tone.
No, I felt like it was different. I can't figure out why. I mean, that's the big question. Because everyone obviously goes to this judge. Does she know? Everyone's bringing up Noonan because she mentioned the cop's name several times. Like, she kept saying she had to protect the public or Noonan, this big, large man who's a very large cop who shot Kelsey. And for me, the thing I'm thinking about, like, if I'm worried about Kelsey being a danger to anyone because she's got postpartum depression, I'm thinking about the baby. That's the only one I'd be worried about. And she didn't bring up the baby or the the ex-boyfriend, but she's talking about the cop who shot her, which is to me just weird because Kelsey has no gun. She's got no vehicle. She has to stay at her parents' house. She's got an ankle bracelet, and this guy's a large man with a gun, illegal gun. So it just seemed so bizarre to me. Yeah, and it just what you said too. You brought up the fact that the judge was asking for doctor affidavit.
Mhm.
So they're like, and then because they didn't have it, she claimed you're going back to jail. Well, the next day or two, Tim Bradel, the defense attorney, Martha Coakley, they got that affidavit from the doctor.
Yes, they did.
So they file it for, reconsideration, and she just denies it, doesn't even have a hearing. She's
Yeah,
just like, they gave her what she asked for, and still that wasn't enough.
yeah, and
Like, it just shows, I can see people getting, like, I'm Irish. I got an Irish temper. Sometimes I got mad, but like, it doesn't last. Like, the next day, I realized, man, I got too mad. That was ridiculous. I'm sorry. Let's work this out. But days later, and she's still angry. I just don't get that part of it. Even it just, to me, it drives me nuts that she wouldn't even reconsider it.
Yeah, again, of course, judges have discretion, it's denied, then you go through the appeal process. What was bothersome to me were things that were said during that hearing, like the email from the probation office. Well, we have this
Yeah.
email, that's hearsay. And, even when they had affidavits and she was saying that's hearsay. I was literally taken aback by that because hearsay is absolutely 100% admissible in a probation revocation hearing or a dangerousness hearing. Completely admissible. Not only admissible by statute, it's admissible by case law. The Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts has told judges very clearly, you do not have to bring all these people in. Case law, we've had case law after case law that says information from a probation officer, as long as it can be deemed reliable, and just the fact that it's a probation officer makes it reliable, hearsay is admissible. So, the affidavits, completely admissible. Hearsay, admissible. Email, admissible. Not only by statute, but by case law and by, the SJC has made the SJC has made very clear exactly what the rules are. So as I said, she's the judge. She can make decisions however she wants to. But my being upset with this is, I thought they had plenty of medical evidence. Well, that's just me. Some judges would say yes, some judges would say no. What concerned me was about the process, because one thing that you just brought out was she said, well, she's a danger. Well, first of all, she turned this into a revocation hearing. It wasn't a dangerousness hearing under 58A. So there is a thing called a dangerousness hearing where you have to make a finding by clear and convincing evidence that there are no conditions of release that would protect a victim or the community. And it sounded to me like she kind of turned it into a revocation hearing without anybody asking for it. But a judge doesn't have the authority to do a dangerousness hearing sua sponte. A judge, the district attorney has to petition for a dangerousness hearing. Yet when she made her ruling, she was talking about dangerousness. And I thought, there's all kinds of things being mixed up here. There are probation revocations being mixed up. There are violations of 58A, which she mentioned, being mixed up. And then she's talking about dangerousness, but no one ever petitioned for a dangerousness hearing. And that ship had sailed after she was released the first time. So those are the concerns. Those were the concerns that I had, and as I said, a judge is going to decide what a judge is going to decide. But I had, for me, I just had concerns about the process and the need to follow the process, and the need for, for every litigant to have due process rights in those kinds of hearings. Oh, I am not hearing you. Did I lose you?
Sorry.
There you
For a
go.
second. Thank you for letting me know. The hearing before that, Judy F is making a great point about it, because when Kelsey got released the first day, Tim Bradel, the attorney, brought up the fact that she was going to go in for a liver surgery the next day, but she has an ankle bracelet on. And Tim Bradel said, on some of my past clients, the doctors have required them to take the ankle bracelet off. Can we just request that the bracelet get taken off that morning? And Kelsey will come back to probation that afternoon. It's a day surgery, and she'll have the bracelet put back on. And the judge refused. The judge said, I need an affidavit from the doctor. And the surgery was happening the next morning. And I know that I talked to Kelsey again when we were walking out, and she said she was going to have the surgery canceled. She was just going to cancel her liver surgery because this judge wouldn't allow it without an affidavit to have them take off the ankle bracelet. Is that unusual, do you think, as well?
Well, yes, I think it's unusual. I cannot even think of a time that if someone came into my courtroom and said they're going to have surgery, liver surgery, or any kind of surgery the next day, and we need to remove the bracelet. I cannot ever think of a time that I can't even imagine a time that I would have said no to that, nor can I imagine a time when a probation officer would say, Judge, we want to leave the bracelet on. I can't even imagine.
It's funny because the probation officer, same guy, was there that day and said, no, we don't have an issue with it. It's totally fine. We're fine with it, Your Honor, if she has it taken off. And again, I think at one point she might have asked the probation officer, do you know if they always require the ankle bracelet to be taken off? And I think if I'm recalling this right, the probation officer said sometimes the doctors do, sometimes they don't, So, and the judge is like, well, that's why we need an affidavit. I need to make sure that this doctor is requiring that. And it was just like, oh. And so, I mean, she just got out of jail. How's she going to go get an affidavit from the doctor for tomorrow morning? You know what I mean? It's like,
and what's the harm in taking the bracelet off? She's under anesthesia.
Yeah.
I know. That's just the basic, she's absolutely under anesthesia. I mean, again, I've only done it once. It's very rare for me to talk about, a judge's decision. Tons of people write to me, will you talk about this case or that case, some of the national cases, and I never do. But, only twice I've done it. This is only the second time, only to say that, my understanding and knowledge after years of being a judge and doing thousands of probation revocation hearings and dangerousness hearings, bail hearings, that, my understanding of the law and how it works just didn't seem to be happening in that courtroom. I never heard anybody give her notice that it was that this was a violation hearing. It requires, notice with an opportunity to be heard so that you can bring in your witnesses. And she didn't have that. And so, my comments here really, sort of not about the substance of the case. My comments are about, as I've said all along, is the procedural aspects of this case. As far as the decisions that she made, like I said, those are her decisions personally. Based on what I heard in that hearing, I would have decided, completely different. Yes, I would have said, take the bracelet off. And of course, I don't think you have to have my background of teaching cardiopulmonary anatomy and taking care of people on life support systems to know that when you have that kind of damage to the lung and chest wall and to the diaphragm, that it might be difficult to blow into a scram. And then the other thing is it's not like they just said they didn't want her to do it. They said she'll do a urine. And really under the law, you have to consider the least restrictive alternative when you're talking about conditions of release. And so that's actually more restrictive, and she was willing to do it. So I didn't understand it, but yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about the case.
Yeah. And some people have mentioned like disability and accommodations that, generally like federal law, you're supposed to make reasonable accommodations for people if they have health disability and there's nothing. I mean, it's just,
You certainly can argue, as lawyers, say, Judge, we just want to say, our client fits under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and right. And she's entitled, and you could kind of make that argument, basically saying, we think your decision is a civil rights violation. It's a separate genre, but I think people can say to a judge, look, Judge, you're dealing with a litigant who's disabled. And, as far as we're concerned, both under Massachusetts, under federal ADA law and under the Massachusetts anti-discrimination law for people that fit into that category, we have to accommodate them. So it's a good question to ask. I don't know that the judge was convinced about anything here, and and I don't know why. And certainly, as I said, it's her decision, and she can make her decision. My concern was about the process, based on what I heard. I just did not hear any notice, and I don't think she had an opportunity to bring in witnesses. And they turned a motion into a revocation hearing and then locked her up. When people lose their liberty, that's a real due process concern. That's a 14th Amendment issue. And from a constitutional perspective, I just didn't agree with it just because of the process.
And one of our mods here is actually a prison guard. And so he knows quite a bit about this stuff with the surgeries and the ankle bracelets. He said Scott McGinnis says surgeons don't operate on patients in chains or GPS anklets on. Doesn't happen. So I trust Scott on this. So again, it's like that was to me shocking that she had to cancel a liver surgery, and then she gets thrown in jail anyways, even going through all that.
Well, did they not make an Eighth Amendment argument? That it was cruel and unusual, for your person here
He did. He said cruel and unusual. I think the judge got very angry about that too.
Very angry.
She was like, cruel and unusual. She was like doing that kind of talk.
And the interesting thing about that is you talk about, this person who works for the DOC, who's listening. If that happened to a prisoner and they said, and the prisoner said, and they said, you have to keep the bracelet on, and the doctors wanted it off. I mean, could you treat someone who's incarcerated the same way? That's why they were comparing it, because, people have rights to medical care. And here you have a litigant canceling liver surgery because they can't remove the bracelet. And the other thing is, those bracelets, they're electronic. So I can't even imagine, in surgery where everything is electronic. I mean, it's not like people are using their cell phones in the operating room. It's really, probably not safe to keep those on. So I can see why they were making the Eighth Amendment argument. And I think Brattle said, well, this is one of our arguments, that what you're doing is cruel and unusual. I don't know if they have appealed that decision, because usually those appeals are heard pretty quickly. I don't know if they've done a single justice, but I'm sorry I interrupted.
I'm sure.
You.
He did say SJC at the end, so I'm assuming he's gonna appeal all of this stuff. But like you said, how long will it take?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it should. I would think it would, because it kind of fits into the bail genre. Although this is revocation hearing, so I don't know, whether or not it would be heard by a single justice, or whether they have to wait for an appeal. But I let me put it this way: I think there are procedural issues in the case that I would think are reversible error. The SJC may not agree. After 20 years, I'm kind of done predicting what the SJC is going to do. Same, I was an appellate attorney and did appeals, and I learned not to predict what they were going to do. I've been flipped a few times like every other judge. You just don't know what the SJC or the appeals court's going to do. But, I mean, from my perspective, I thought there was some reversible error there.
Definitely. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it gets appealed and they take it up. One of the questions I have for you too is this Martha Coakley, the retired Attorney General of Massachusetts, former DA of Middlesex. Mm-hmm. She is on this case. She's defending Kelsey Fitzsimmons. And that, to me, that's why I'm even more shocked this is happening, because I figured a judge would kind of see the AG there, the retired AG that everybody in the state pretty much knows who she is, and say, hey, this is obviously someone that deserves some type of defense, because the AG sitting there. As a judge, if you see Attorney Martha Coakley representing somebody like Kelsey Fitzsimmons in her situation, does that make a difference at all? Do you kind of like, or not? Like, as a judge, I know you probably doesn't make a difference, but I'm thinking it might a little bit. I don't know.
Right. It's all based on the evidence, but I mean, it is notable, like when the former Attorney General walks into your courtroom, it's like, and there were a few times, when I had, well-known, statewide known attorneys, who were, known by a lot of people, but, you're just sitting there, you're telling yourself, I have to make a decision based on the evidence, like every other case, no matter who's in front of me, whether it's some guy that's just out of law school and it's his first case, or whether it's Martha Coakley. I'm just going to listen to the evidence, and I'm going to do what I hope will be the right thing. And I'm going to really consider it. I'm going to listen to everybody. I'm going to give everybody their opportunity, and then make a decision. But, I would imagine it was, maybe the judge was taken aback a little bit. I mean, I would have been surprised, I think, to see the former Attorney General walk into my courtroom. But I can honestly say it would not have made a difference in anything I decided, because it's all based on the evidence, and that's the way it has to be.
Do you think, for me, covering this as a journalist reporter, we always, have decisions to make, what we're going to cover and what we're not going to cover. For me, Martha Coakley jumping on this gave me kind of an indication, I think, that this is probably worth covering, because I think she came to some type of determination to get on this. Do you think that's true? Do you think that she's getting involved in this because she sees something that's an injustice? And what do you think?
I think it may just be that, from the time of the arraignment, that she sees an injustice, procedure wise. And I think what she's trying to do is make sure that, given the nature of it, and the publicity of it, and the strange happenings in the case, and, it's a very unusual case, that she stepped in to ensure that Kelsey Fitzsimmons' rights are protected. Ultimately, maybe she will be convicted ultimately, based on the facts. And, I haven't read every fact, but, as I said, in domestic violence cases, when police walk into a place and someone has a gun, it's not surprising that's, someone might get hurt, or that the police might draw their weapons. That's what they're trained to do, when someone picks up a gun or has a gun. But I don't know exactly how it all went down. But she's charged. They didn't find that there was an intentional attempt to murder police officers, but they did find what I think was probably appropriate from the grand jury, at least the grand jury did, was that it was an assault with a dangerous weapon because she had a gun in her hand, during these very high potential for violent episodes. I don't know if you don't know if it's going to be a trial or whether or not it could come to some agreement. I think that there's a sense, and maybe, Martha Coakley had this sense that, we're dealing with someone who was also in crisis. I mean, all of a sudden people are coming into this place, they're taking baby away. Look, I took a lot of babies away from people. It's not an easy thing to do. And, when there's a restraining order, people are walking in and they're saying, we're taking your baby away from you. And someone who has had postpartum depression, look, I've had to do like hundreds of times. And then there were other times when the department wanted to take a baby away from someone, and they're in the courtroom, sobbing. And there were times that I didn't, based on the evidence. I would say, no, this baby's going back to these people. There's just not enough evidence here. And, the case is open and we'll follow it. But I cannot even tell you how difficult it is, and I'm not in a high, dangerous environment. There are court officers there, it's all very well controlled. And I'm having to say, I'm going to place this baby in custody, and the department will place the child in foster care or with a parent, or with a grandparent or something like that. It's gut-wrenching to do it. It's very hard. It was hard for me to do it. And when I did do it, I would talk to the parent and I would say, look, based on what's going on, you were severely injured in this domestic violence episode. It's been going on for a while. No one's going to help. I need to make sure the baby is safe. But that doesn't mean, and I'm telling you today, and I would say this right away from the get-go, I want this baby back with you. And that's my goal, and that's all of our goals. And a lot of times in substance abuse cases, where the neglect was so severe and so serious, I would say, look, let's get you into the treatment you need so I can get this baby back to you. Because you don't take away every baby. Substance abuse, sometimes you can, deal with it. People get into rehab and they're doing well and the child can be at home. But sometimes not. But, I always took the position that I wasn't going to ever remove a child without talking to the parent and telling them why I'm doing it, and not just saying, okay, the evidence is over. I find, based on the standard for temporary removal, that the child will remain in temporary custody, blah, 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 blah. I never could be like that, and I'm sure some people are, and that's okay. Some people are like, look, I looked at the evidence and this is it. It wasn't my style. My style was, look, let me have a conversation with you, so that people walked out of there thinking, I'm going to do what I need to do, and this judge will give me my baby back. And that happened a lot of times. So,
You treat them like a human too, and you give them some dignity and give them a benchmark, something to.
right.
And I think a lot of times people, especially when they're down and out, a lot of people think the system's not going to give them a fair shake, So I think that you're just being straight with them and saying, hey, I want you to succeed. This is what it's going to take. I think sometimes that's very helpful to maybe establish trust there, because I think that's missing a lot with people who are down and out. Trust.
Right. You're in a court. You don't have to talk to people. in the juvenile court. You don't have to talk to kids. I mean, every 15, 16-year-old that was in my court, if it wasn't maybe a delinquency case, but a runaway or whatever, every kid was a conversation. Every kid was, tell me about you. What's your story? What are you good at? Every single kid, that was the conversation. And so, I think in this case with Kelsey Fitzsimmons, it's like you have this baby, you've carried this baby for 9 months, you're struggling after the baby's born, but this is your baby. And all of a sudden people are standing in your home and they're saying, we're taking your baby away from you and we're serving you with a restraining order. It has the potential to explode very quickly. And you can see, how it all went down, and you can understand it to a degree from both perspectives, not only from the perspective of the police, who want to go home at the end of the day, back to their family, but from her perspective of like, oh my God, they're taking my baby away. It's very hard to do. It's hard for me to explain and to express to people that are watching this and chatting about it, just how hard it is. I'm sure many of the people that are on here are parents and can't even imagine what it would be like, for a judge or for police or someone to say, we're taking your child away from you. It's a life-changing thing. And to me, the only way to handle it is with empathy and with education and explaining it and just saying, I want to work with you. Let me help you. So, I can see why it was so difficult for Kelsey Fitzsimmons.
Stephen had a good question here. He's asking, we should be requiring every police department to have body cameras. This North Andover police received $150,000 for body cameras, and then nothing happened for many years now, apparently. I mean, this is the big thing about this case, is that we don't know what really happened when the guns got drawn, and it's because there's lack of body cameras. What do you think about that? I mean, how important do you think body cameras are?
Well, this is one issue I teach about. We talk about it in a course that I teach sometimes, which is criminal justice ethics in a master's program. So we talk about body cams and I think body cams are extremely important, but there's sort of the privacy realm of it too, because when they're responding, there are other people that are there, who are not involved with the particular crime. And so, there's a balance. As you probably know, the ACLU has, wants a lot of restrictions on body cams and on the what they call them body worn cameras, BWCs. The ACLU has a lot to say. They write a lot about body cams. But I think, that for the most part, body cams probably give you a very accurate picture of what's going on. I sort of tell this story about, I was doing a trial. I don't think it wasn't a jury trial, but it was a trial where kids were involved with damaging a car or a truck or something like that. And the police officer entered a neighbor's house and was talking to the neighbor, and the neighbor's video camera was on, and their rain camera was on. And so the body cam was taking in what had been on the ring cam, and the ring cam had actually showed what had actually happened with these kids. But one of the kids that came in to testify said, no, nobody ever damaged the car. And so, so you can see how it can tell a story that's very different than what a witness might say. But the other side of it is, that, there's a lot of people around, and you have a police officer with a body camera, and on that body camera are people that aren't really involved, and then there becomes this sort of privacy issue. A lot of cases also raise issues. They go into a home, and on the body cam you can see something that's on the body cam that might not have been seen, that might be illegal, like maybe drugs or something like that. So there's a lot of emerging case law about it. but I will say that as far as I know, just talking to the students in my class that are getting their master's degree, they're all police officers. And it's interesting to hear their perspective, and they do sort of understand that there's a balance that has to be made. But the majority of police officers support having a body camera. I think they feel
I would think
protected.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I mean, that's,
remember when I was 20 something years old, like 22, 23, at a bar, and one of our friends was in uniform, police officer, just he was doing the patrol in the area. And some drunk guy started a fight with him, like totally jumped him. Like, and he defended himself, and I saw the whole thing. I was a witness to it, and that guy tried to sue my friend after he jumped him, like, and he didn't have a body cam, so he was relying on his friends who saw it, like, which was one of me, and I was like, I'll write an affidavit. I saw everything,
right.
like, so it's like, I think in the end that guy dropped the lawsuit against my friend who was the cop, but it was like, I always think back on that because I'm like, geez, that would have, if he had a body camera, he would have been totally, he would have needed to call us up and say, hey, can you write an affidavit for me? Like, I thought that was shocking. And I just realized at that moment, like, what police officers at a young age, I realized, like, wow, these guys are dealing with a bunch of BS. Like, because I used to work in bars and restaurants too, and I see the drunks. Drunks get out of control. And can you imagine, like, when I was a bouncer, they were always trying to start fights with you. I can't imagine being a cop, like they
Yeah.
do get a lot of shit, like unprovoked, like just a drunk guy comes up to you and starts trying to fight you.
Yeah. Especially now in today's
Yeah.
circumstances, where people have, but I mean, I've had, many, many cases, with police officers. I mean, and I've learned so much from them teaching constitutional law and now working for the Massachusetts Municipal Police Institute, doing domestic violence trainings. And I have to say, I've met, these people, these police officers that I met, they want to do the right thing. They go to these trainings, to basically have the knowledge that they need to have, and to hear them talk, and sometimes, they will write on some of the assignments, when we're talking about some of these ethical violations, they'll say, look, I mean, I'm doing my job, but, at the end of the day, I want to go home to my family. And, you can't blame them for that. So, but it's been really interesting, doing these, working for the MPI and teaching con law and sometimes ethics, because I've learned a lot from their perspective, because the perspective that you have as a judge is you're hearing their testimony, and oftentimes their testimony is very well done. Then at times you can have police officers who get upset on cross-examination or whatever, but I have a great perspective on it now, teaching and kind of working with them. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Now, we've been talking a lot about some of the things that you've seen when you were a judge, and I'm just thinking about some of the rulings that you've made. You talked about some of those, even separating families and taking children away, how tough that is. How often do you still, I imagine you still think about some of the kids that you've seen over the years, and how hard is that for you? Because I imagine there's got to be, I'm sure some judges it doesn't bother them at all, but I'm sure other judges it does. Does it keep you up at night? Like when you were making these type of rulings, would you toss and turn and worry that you made the right decision? And do you worry about the kids later? How does that work out? Because for me, I don't think that's why I was like, I can't be a cop. I'd feel so bad for anyone that I was busting. Like, I don't think I could do it. Like, I just wonder how because you seem like you care and you're in that kind of position. I just wonder, did it affect you like that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it did, it depends. I mean, I was hearing so many cases, in the course of a day if I wasn't in trial. The one thing that I would talk about at times with other judges is, you make a decision and you base it on the evidence and you do everything you need to do, and you can't second guess it. What happens, happens. But, some of the cases, were so serious, and it was so difficult that, it was hard to get out of your head. But I mean, I had to come home. When I got on the bench, my kids were, I think, 6 and 3. So, it was just a lot, I mean, I had, to deal with, of course, my husband, who was traveling a lot for his work. And, I had these kids. And so, you have to turn it off. And that's what you have to do. I mean, there are some cases that I tell people I never forget, and a lot of times I would talk about this case. You can't talk about cases in juvenile court, mostly it's closed, but one of the ones where that was open was a little boy named Nathaniel Turner. It was all in the news and it was everywhere because it had to be a public case. And he lived in Alabama, but the father sought visitation, never had really much visitation. He was living with the grandmother in Alabama. And the family court judge, just allowed for visitation. And so the grandmother sent him back here for the summer, and the father became abusive and just beat that boy, abused that boy, punched him in the head. And then he was in a coma, and the hospital basically took the position that he was brain dead. The family did not agree with that. And so a care and protection petition was filed, of course, to remove custody from the father, so he couldn't make any decisions, about the child and whether he should come off of the ventilator. One of the reasons I recall that is because the juvenile court was closed, and I was in Boston testifying at something, and at the governor's council, and people said, okay, they're coming in this afternoon. So the doctor was going to testify, and I walked into the courtroom, and there were like cameras and, reporters and people taking pictures, which was overwhelming to me because that never happens. But those cases by law had to be public. And I had to decide, whether or not I agreed with the hospital that he was brain dead. And once I made that decision, which was very hard, I got off the bench. It was overwhelming, and I'm trying not to cry because, of course, I had to.
I feel that way right now. I mean, that's
By the law,
got to be very heavy to make that decision for another family.
And I had to see the child. By law, you have to see every child who's before your court. So I went up to the hospital, went into the intensive care unit, and here's this beautiful boy laying there, his eyes closed, he's in a coma. I mean, I was used to hospital intensive care units because, of course, I had worked in one, but it was a whole different perspective. And then I had to go back and make this decision. And the doctor testified. And during that testimony, I asked the doctor a lot of questions. The father wouldn't come out of the lockup, but his lawyer was there saying the father was opposed to him being taken off the ventilator. And, I heard all the evidence, and it was clear that he was never going to recover. He was, clearly had been brain dead. And so, I made the order, and, it was, of course, and it was all over the news, and, it was just, and it was just really hard. I remember saying this was a gut-wrenching decision. This is heart-wrenching for the families. But, I made the decision. And once I made the decision, I returned custody to the grandmother and to the family to decide whether they wanted to donate his organs, before they removed him from. So, that's one case. I mean, there are cases that stay in my head. There are some kids. The very last case I had was a 15-year-old kid, and I wish I knew what had happened to him. He was a great kid. He just was on the run from a program and got into a car, got into a stolen car with another kid. And I loved that kid. He was just a great kid. I'm like, tell me your story. He had been in foster care for years. He was just a really sweet kid. And, before he walked out, I didn't hold him on bail or anything. I released him. And I said, I just want to say I'm sorry. And she said, for what? And I said, because we failed you. You've been in foster care all these years. That means we failed you. You don't belong there. You should have a home. I mean, kids like that, I really miss. I have to say, I had a bunch of kids like that. So I do miss that. But I will say, people say, do you miss being a judge? And I say, no, I don't miss hearing child abuse cases every day of my life. I just don't,
Imagine.
and it is what
Yeah.
it is. But thanks for asking. I don't usually talk about this stuff. So
Well, I think
probably,
it's a good for people to hear because I don't think people think about it. You know.
yeah, it's hard to know what's going on behind closed doors, especially in
Right.
the juvenile court. So, hopefully it gives someone people some perspective and that, the people that are watching and commenting, hopefully maybe they gained a little bit of insight into how it works and how the system works. Um, and we'll at least come away with some education. So
Definitely. And I think
thanks.
some more of them are going to read your book too. A lot of people are talking about some of them have already read it. Other people are going to buy it and they bought it tonight. Julie has a question. She says, what about the original removal order? How is that possible without CPS? What is the process in Mass? Can one parent get an emergency removal just from their written statement?
Yeah, it's a great question. It doesn't necessarily work that way. What gets happened is someone files what's called a 51A, which is a report of child abuse and neglect, and DCF goes out and says, okay, there's a real serious problem here. We have a child who is very sick and not getting medical care, or they go in and the child has been left alone, something like that. And so under the law, they have the right to do an emergency removal if they're and without a court but the order, but
Without a hearing.
they have to be in court within 24 hours or at the next day if it's an emergency removal. If it's not an emergency removal, but they say we can't allow this child to stay here, there are massive neglect issues, then they come in with an affidavit ex parte, meaning they come in without notice to the parents or anyone else at that time, and they come before a judge, and then the judge reads the affidavit, and then I would read the affidavit and say, okay, there are real serious issues, I'm going to grant you custody, but then there's a hearing within 3 days to see whether, and it's a hearing, like a full-blown hearing, unless the parents agree. It's just like any trial. There are witnesses and decisions that have to be made about whether the child will stay in care and go to foster care. Or sometimes I did not put kids in DCF. Sometimes I released them to the grandparents. If the grandparents came in and say, we want custody, we can take care of our grandchild. That's called a third party custody hearing. So I did that a lot. A lot of times I felt really comfortable with the grandparents and would give them custody and then keep the case open, which made it easier for parents to visit their child as opposed to visiting in a DCF office once a week. When a child is with the grandparents, you can do a lot more to maintain the parent-child relationship.
Like grandparents is sometimes the best option too,
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
The CO on the down low makes note, says, I gotta say, once Kelsey was brought up, Judge Erskine fired up. I believe she understands how frustrated we are, and she is as well. By the way, I'm in the middle of her book now. So it sounds
Oh,
like he's reading your book right now.
I want to know what you think of it. But anyway, what I tell people if they read the book and they like it, to put a review on Amazon, because with those reviews sell more books, and then the royalties, then I get a royalty check, and then I send it to the Dave Thomas Foundation for adoption. So Blair and Jonathan and I, and so for the people that have bought the book, I want to say thank you, and Blair and Jonathan would say thank you too. I know they're very grateful. But we made that decision. So and I said, when I wrote the book, I said to them, I don't want to profit off this, because then people are going to say, well, it's easy to profit off Harmony's death, because it's such. And I just wasn't about that. So that's how the decision was made. But thank you to all of those who
Great cause.
in the
Yeah, I
chat,
love it.
reading the book or are buying the book or are thinking about buying the book. I can't tell you how grateful I am, because it gets the word out about what the problems are in the system.
Like, I hope people give those Amazon reviews, buy the book and give some Amazon reviews, help doubly, and just I love it.
But thanks,
Olivia
Mike.
Nile, she's actually involved in the Turtle Boy case. She's the legal analyst. She does a lot of research. She's phenomenal. She's also very popular on Twitter, very much respected. She's really good. Watches the show, and she just made this note. How is Kelsey's condition any different than a defendant who has a respiratory condition that precludes them from performing a breathalyzer? And thus, how is this decision not medical discrimination? I know we kind of
Well,
mentioned that earlier, right?
yeah, I mean, I can't use, can't actually classify it as medical discrimination, but I see what you're saying. And, I think, as I said, it is concerning. It's no different than someone, if someone were in my court, like I had lots of kids, who had asthma, and I know that at times asthmatics can't, blow into, whatever it is that whatever kind of test they're doing. Even when
Yeah.
you do pulmonary function testing, when doctors, pulmonologists want to, or when I did those, you have to blow into this little device, and you have to blow very hard and very long in order to determine lung capacity. So yeah, it's concerning. I think, to answer your question, Olivia, what I would say is I'm hopeful that the SJC or whoever is reviewing this case will say that the judge did not give enough consideration to the medical issue or to another less restrictive alternative, and that might be the case. That's on the substantive issue. That's even separate from the procedural issue, which I still haven't been able to understand. I mean, I could have missed something, but I just, yeah. I mean, I was pretty upset to hear it because, when you're a judge for as long as I do, there's a process and what that process is. It's frustrating for me to hear that someone in the system may not have followed the process if that's what happened. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. So, yeah, it's hard not to get fired up about that because, people have rights. And, it's, for me, when I think people's rights may not be being recognized by the court, I'm going to speak up, even though I rarely do it. And I have no idea what the pushback will be, on this. But, I hope it will be reversed. That's, I guess, what I'm going to say.
So glad that you spoke up on it. I want to thank you for coming on today, Carol. I love it. And this is right here. Look at this comment. E. Flanda says that you're the greatest guest ever that we've ever had. This is the best guest you've ever had.
Well,
right there.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Last thing I will say is, I'm not here to, criticize the judge in a way just to say, I don't think this judge is smart or whatever. I'm here to sort of criticize what I view as a process violation, and just my take on the medical issue. Having a medical background, that I don't think it's fair. That doesn't mean another judge, doesn't have the right to make that decision. But I don't like to just the same as I did on Lawyer, just say I said, I'm not here to say, mean things, about the judge or call the judge by any names or pejorative names or anything like that. I'm here to look at whether or not, in my view, the judge was a neutral arbitrator and whether or not a person's rights, in my view, may have been compromised. So I hope people will look at it that way.
Yeah, it should be allowed. I mean, you should be able to look at the actions. You're not calling her names. You're not attacking her. It should be allowed. Like,
right. Yeah. I just always like to say, I'm not here to attack, but, maybe it'll be viewed that way. Like I said, I've sort of been called a rogue judge for, actually speaking out, about these things. But, when you're a judge, you can't speak out. They make that very clear. Speak out. You're going to. I had op-ed pieces published, and they didn't like that. But under the rules, I could publish things that were based on the administration of justice, and that's what I wrote about relative to children. But yeah, so my book is really serious, which is why I think during the periods of time, that I was a judge, why I wrote the first children's book, and and I just needed to take a break. This is the 25th of September is the anniversary of when I was sworn in.
Wow,
And
today's the date. Today
yeah,
is the
that was
wow.
25th of September, 2 weeks after 9/11. So I didn't even know
Wow.
it was going to happen. So it was a long time ago. Yes, because I was on the bench for 22 years, and I was lucky. I got on when I was a little younger. They didn't, a lot of times they would wait till you were in your 50s, but not when I got on. But um, it's interesting. And tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of the launch of A Cruel Injustice. So,
It's been
so
one
thank
year
you
from the
very
book's
much.
been out,
Yeah,
and you're still selling books because I mean, Sarah just said she just bought the book. I cannot wait to receive your book, Sarah. Be
thanks.
creative, Sarah. So
I'll tell them
people
if
are buying the book tonight.
for the ones that have little kids, ages 4 to 9, go with the children's books, because it's a lot lighter. But
There you go.
it's all
The
meant.
easy.
I have my own little company, a DBA called Kid Hero Books, and I'm committed to putting these stories out there where the kids are always the heroes. The adults aren't in the story, and the kids are always the heroes. But thank you, Mike, for everything. I
I
really.
love that. I love
And
the kids are the hero. I love that.
yep, yep.
That's
So I thank you, all the comments and the questions and everything. That's a lot of discussion, almost like an hour and 45 minutes. But
we
thank you
did
so
great.
much.
I mean, I want to thank you so much for being here. It's been amazing. I mean, this is for you to come out and talk about Kelsey. I'm very thankful of that and the advocacy that you're doing for Harmony and just all the other kids out there that definitely need a commission. I anything we can do to support any of that, you just let us know. And
I
I'm so
will.
thankful that you're here tonight, Carol.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And I will let you know. And when it gets close, maybe we'll do this again, or if people have questions about children's cases. I just did court TV on a little girl in Florida that was murdered, another DCF failure. I like this kind of forum better because it's more of a discussion than a 2 minute,
Yeah.
answer. So
Yeah.
thank you,
Just like
everybody.
talking to your friends, and just
Exactly.
providing some education and it's in the live audience. It's great that you can
Yeah.
kind of answer questions too. So I'm so thankful you took the time with us tonight, and I hope everyone buys your book. And we're supporting anything that you do. Like I would like probably I'll hit up Michael Moore too because I want to
Good.
push that commission thing. He's come on the show a couple times for different subjects. He's a great guy, and I'm glad that he's back in the Harmony Commission.
He's been a good friend. The day I the day the Office of the Child Advocate report came out, I called him and I said, Mike, let's get a commission together. What do you think? And we worked together, and he's so good. Yeah, give him a call. I'm sure he'll
Senator Michael O'More for
yeah.
people. He's a great. I think he's out there in Western Mass. Where do you know exactly where his district is?
Oh, I live in his
Like
district. So his
Long
district.
Meadow or something? Where is
No,
it?
his district is Worcester, Westboro, Grafton, Upton, Central Mass is his
There you
district.
go.
So
So you know those towns. I don't really. I mean,
yeah,
I know the Worcester Centrum,
yep,
but I mean, I'm an Eastern Mass guy. So
yeah.
yeah, it's funny because I went to Bridgewater State and like one of my roommates at one point was from Grafton. So I think he's actually a football coach. His team keeps winning Super Bowls, high school
Nice.
Super
That's
Bowls. So
awesome. Yeah,
but
Mike
I,
was.
I don't think it's Grafton. I'm trying to remember what school he's at
Yeah,
now. It's one
he
of the small. It's like whatever the smallest division, like Division 6 or 7.
yeah.
They keep winning. His name's Roscoe, Mike Ross. So
Oh, yeah.
he's a coach.
That
Yeah,
sounds familiar. Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mike is he's a Central Mass and kind of Southern Worcester County. So yeah, he's a good guy. So, but thank you. And I want to thank all the people in the chat, yeah, wonderful. I appreciate the kind comments and all your support. So it's really, someone's asking about children's book. They're called the Scary Cloud Monster and the Scary Snow Monster. That'll be up on Amazon maybe next week and in Barnes and Noble. I'm just about to get it out there. So
And if you Google Carol, or not Google, if you put the Carol Erskine in the search on the Amazon, her book, all her books will pop up too. You can find them all that way.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Mike, hopefully, we'll talk again.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Judge Carol Erskine. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great night and great weekend. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thanks, everybody.
And we're the Young Jerks. That was so good. I'm so glad that we could have her on for an hour and 49 minutes. That was great. I hope I answered everyone's questions. I know some people were throwing up a lot of questions. I tried to answer as many as I could. She did great. She is. We did have some sound issues. At first, her mic was acting up, but then it got better, and it was mine. People started complaining about, saying I'm too soft again. I have it turned all the way up. I think I might need a new mic, honestly. But we did good. Carol is great. I really did enjoy that, and I'm so glad she came on. Someone tried to cancel this interview today. Some crazy guy. Whatever. I'm so glad she came on. She was really good. And it's funny when someone said you definitely do need a new mic. This is the new mic. It's so funny. Like, I got this really nice mic here, this one that I should use, but it's hooked into a system. So I got rid of the nice mic because I don't want to plug it into the system. The system wasn't working, the board. So then I got this new mic. This is a brand new mic. I know, and ever since it hasn't been as good. So I'm probably gonna have to get a new mic. Or I'll have to plug in the board and use the really nice mic. This is the really nice one. This mic is worth a lot of money, and I don't even use it. It's got great sound. But it's got issues because it goes into a board and you can't turn it up enough. I don't know. I don't know. I'm having audio issues. I don't know. I try my best, but we'll figure it out. I want to thank everyone who's been watching, supporting. I want to thank our moderators tonight. The mods in the chat. I want to thank Sarah, Stephanie, Jen O. Who else I missed? Sarah, Stephanie, MJ. MJ was in the chat tonight. And Scott McGinnis. We posted some of his comments tonight. There he is. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for live streaming from court for us yesterday too, Scott. That was great. I know, right? That's the problem too. This is the funniest thing. Sarah is so right. I will buy a new mic. You sounded fine to me, she says. You'll buy a new mic and someone will have an issue with that one too. Exactly. No matter what I do. No matter what I do. I've just come to the realization that we have so many people watching us now that there's always going to be somebody in the audience that just is going to pick something apart. It's just the way it is. Oh, I'm glad I could get your question in. I tried to get as many questions as I could tonight. I'm actually going to go through all the super chats. I tried to post them all up tonight. I didn't get to read all of them, but I appreciate everyone. CEO on the down low, thank you so much. We did read your super chat. Thank you so much. We did read yours as well, Aflanda. Thank you. Under your scars, thank you. And we did answer that question. Can anything be done to reverse the judge's vindictive decisions? SJC is obvious. And obviously, they could also go to federal courts, but Bradel said it that day. SJC. He was telling the judge, if you don't go along with this, we're going to go to the SJC, judge. Please don't make us go to the SJC. He was basically saying that. So, and I'm pretty sure he's already filed that. I'm sure it's been filed. I'm sure we're just waiting to see if a single justice or the whole SJC has to rule on it. Sarah B. Creative, thank you for buying the book tonight. Thank you for the comment. Tara Rayner sent 2 Canadians, said she took issue with cruel and unusual punishment. I know that's what got me going with the judge when she's mocking it. You know, it's one thing if you're mocking it because you don't believe it, but how can't you believe this? The woman has 2 cracked ribs, severe lung damage, diaphragm damage, liver damage. She's not this isn't BS. You know what I mean? So I don't know how she could mock that. That was so bizarro. Melissa A. sent 499 says, "Did judge have any advice or advocacy resources, references for former foster parents and formed legal guardian via the lovely DFC system?" Oh man, I wish I'd seen this earlier. You should probably hit up. I don't know if you're on X or Twitter, but I would hit her up directly on X and ask her that question, and I'll try to ask her it as well. I'm gonna write it down actually. Any advice? But I don't know how to get the answer to you now that she's gone. I'm sorry I missed it. But if you're on X, I'll try to post it on X if she does answer it, if she's able to answer it for foster parents and legal guardians. Man, I'm mad I missed it. I'm sorry, Melissa. I feel like I failed us. I should. This is the one question I should have asked. Great question. I still want to. I'm going to try to ask her. If you do me a favor, though, get on Twitter and hit her up. Carol Erskine is on Twitter. I'll try to ask her on there as well, Melissa. That is a great question. I'm sorry I missed it earlier. Thank you so much, Beverly, and thank you, Auntie BB2, and thank you, Amy. See, some people like the new mic because it doesn't blast their ears out. There you go. Oh, Jane just bought the book and she's gonna write a review on Amazon. Thank you so much, Jane. Let me know how the book is. I think I might have to buy it too. I never have time to read anymore. I got a bunch of Howie's books. I got who else? I got a bunch of books here. That's one I actually I want to read them all, but you know, it's yeah, I think I agree, Jermaine. I think this is a StreamYard issue lately. And I think since StreamYard got bought out, the quality's not as good. They got bought by a big corporation. I'm wondering if I should change to EV Max or one of those other ones. There's some other ones. It's just that I'm used to this one, so I don't think StreamYard's as good as it used to be, honestly. Yeah, the judge did say it all when she said the court is not tolerating anything. That was when she lost her. It is funny, isn't it, SJ? How some are happy, some aren't. Someone named Mike should have a gray mic. I do have a gray mic. I just don't use it. It's sitting right here. This is it. What is it? Audio, whatever that is. It's like, yeah, it's a really nice mic. Said I'm using the cheap mic because it's a USB plug-in and it's easy to operate. I don't need a board for it. I think maybe next what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a lot of money. I'm going to find like the most expensive USB mic. I think that might be next for me. And then we can complain about that one. All right, October 7th is the next hearing for Kelsey Fitzsimmons in Salem Superior Court, 9 a.m. I'm going to be there. I hope other people join. The family is asking you can wear purple if you want to show support for Kelsey. I also posted on our Young Jerks Twitter tonight something that Gator Boy in the Justice for Kelsey Fitzsimmons Facebook group was posted there about how you can write her or send her books or letters of support. If you want to do that, it's on our Twitter page or join the Kelsey Fitzsimmons Facebook group. Great Facebook group they have going. Join that as well. Yes, we all do. Sheila, you are so right. We do pay a fortune. It used to be kind of cheap. Like in the beginning, like some people actually, I think Mazda still doesn't pay. There's like, if you see someone that has the StreamYard logo at the top, they're on the free version. I don't even know if they still have that. They may have gotten rid of it. But there was the free version, and then there was like the $25 version, and then the max one was $49.99 a month in the very beginning. That's the one I've always been on. I'm on the most expensive plan. It allows you to stream more places and have more, more, what do we call that? More data. And so when it got bought out, they like doubled their prices. Now I'm paying, I think, around $100 a month for StreamYard, and it's not as good as it was. Like you pay more and get less. But I think we all do complain about it because you rely on it so much, and when it's not working, with its issues, it's just frustrating. And especially knowing that there are cheaper options now, and I could easily switch over to them. But you don't. There's a familiarity. You want to stick with what you're familiar with. I'm used to it. It took me a while to get used to StreamYard. Now that I'm used to it, I don't want to change to something new. And that's how they get you. That's how they raise the prices and cut the service back. So a lot of us are like that. A lot of us are stuck with it, and we're like, oh, I hate StreamYard, but I don't want to change. I'm paying too much for it, but I don't want to change. I think a lot of us need to change. Maybe I need to just suck it up. I did use EV Mux one night when StreamYard was down. It worked really well. I thought it did. I thought it actually did better video and better audio. So maybe I should change. Maybe I should. I don't know. I know, that's it. I'm used to this thing that I hate. I don't want to change. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. You don't want to change. It's just like that when you have like old shoes. I'm like this. Like even though I know I need a new pair of shoes, I'm like, "Oh, I like these shoes. I don't want to get rid of them." Even though you should have gotten rid of them like 2 months ago. It's kind of like that. People do that with cars too. Like there's certain cars you're like, I can't get rid of this car. This is my favorite car ever. I'm not getting rid of it. Someone said it's like Hulu. Yeah. What's my Gen X got to do with it? M. Your MJ is coming after me saying he's a Gen X. You are too, M. I know you are. M's a Gen X. What did I do? Were they calling me a boomer in the chat? Is that why you're? Oh, I get it. Yeah, they were calling me a boomer. I'm not a boomer. You know I'm not a boomer, Jess. I'm a Gen X. We're even worse. We're worse than boomers. Yeah, you don't. I'm no boomer. I'm a Gen X. I get it. Emma was actually sticking up for me. I get it now. Hey, you millennials and whatever we are calling the rest of the kids below that, like us Gen X's might as well be boomers, right? You don't even know, like, because us Gen X's, like, when we came up, it was like boomers and World War II generation, you know? So when you call us boomers, we just laugh because we're like, you kids don't know. We were the kids. We were the kids. We were the ones going, Jesus, these freaking boomers. We've been saying that forever. Now you're stealing out of shit and using it against us? Come on. You'd rather be a boomer than a millennial? I wouldn't rather be a boomer because they're closer to the grave. Like that's the only reason I wouldn't want to be a boomer is because they're close to the grave. But the thing that the boomers have going for them, Sarah, is they inherited a lot of money. They boomers, they were like, I think the boomers were born at the perfect time where they got the lift of the World War II. They were the babies of World War II, basically. And they made out. I mean, I look at my parents, they bought that house, I don't know, for like 20 something grand back in the day. Just a little cape. And then next thing you know, it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? things have changed. I think Gen X, and especially the kids now, the millennials and below, you guys have it tough because the cost of living is just through the roof. Just not the boomers. I think boomers had it the best economically. You know, World War II generation, they went through a lot of shit. And I think they in the end they did okay, but I think they went through a lot. I think the boomers had it the easiest. Let's just put it that way. And not that I don't like you boomers. It's not your fault. You know, not every boomer inherited a lot. But when I mean inherit too, though, you guys had a lot of opportunities. Let's just put it that way. You know, you could buy a house for 20 grand and have it be worth $500,000 just like 10 years later or whatever, that happened for you. Basically back then a house was like 1 year's salary, maybe, right? Now a house for a lot of people is like 10 years salary, so it's just a different world. And when I say inheritance, I just mean you inherited a much better economy, a better way of living with, GDP rising. You probably had the best economic conditions ever. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you can't compare. Kids today, I just feel so bad for kids today. Like, how are they ever going to afford a home? Like, even people that make good money can't afford a home. There you go. Like this too. My dad was able to support a family of 5 on a high school diploma, own a house and 2 vehicles. Nobody can do that today. Nobody can buy a home on a high school diploma, uh, and buy a home and one person working. I mean, look at my grandfather. My grandfather was an alcoholic, high school diploma, bought a home. I think he had 5, or was it 5 or 6 kids, my grandfather? I'm trying to remember. But yeah, same thing, right? His wife she ended up working. She wasn't RN, but still, that was later. So, I mean, that was regular. That's what everyone did. That doesn't exist anymore. Just different. That's the thing. I'm not saying that everyone who's a boomer inherited stuff. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying you inherited a better way of living, a better economy. You could afford a home. These kids today, they can't afford anything. They're lucky they can rent a one bedroom shack. Yeah, that's it too. Like the kids today, they like we have a kid. He's grown now, but we kicked in money. We've kicked in money a lot to them and they work their asses off, and they're both making good money, and they save, and to get them into the new home, we had to kick in money. Like a lot of parents have to kick in money to the kids today, and it's not the kids' fault. It's just the economy. They inherited a different economy than we. Cost of living's gone through the roof, so it's just different. Yeah, yeah. People who are rich can't even afford to buy homes. That's yeah. I feel bad for young people today. Well, I'm gonna go. I think I did all the super chats. Let me make sure I thanked on the Venmo if anyone kicked in there. I want to thank Carol Erskine. She was phenomenal tonight for being on the show, answering all the questions. I think I'm all caught up on those cash and Venmos. Oh yeah, good. And let me check one more thing. I didn't put it up tonight, but I want to make sure I do keep up with the Give Send Go. I want to thank Sonia for sending $10 to our Give Send Go the other night, and an anonymous giver who gave 25. All right, I think I'm all caught up with our thank yous tonight. Exactly. I remember the big hair too, Scott. Used to go to the heavy metal, you know, the ACDC and Cinderella and all that stuff. Yeah. The big hair. I miss the 80s big hair. You know, I see I just uh, create a big discussion about the cost of living and boomers and kids today. Let's talk about hairspray instead. I do have to go. I want to thank everybody for watching tonight. Carol, thank you so much for being here. Carol Erskine, she's phenomenal. Please buy her book if you can. You want to support her? It's pinned in the chat right now. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. The proceeds from the book, again, go directly. It's called A Cruel Injustice. It's on Kindle. There's paperback. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's also on Amazon. And you can search Judge Carol Erskine. It's actually pronounced Erskine, but it's spelled Erskine with it. It's Erskine if you want to spell it out phonetically. But you could search for all of her books on Amazon, Judge Carol Erskine. And the book is called The Cruel Injustice. It's pinned in the chat right now. Any proceeds, any royalties go directly for helping help kids get adopted. It goes to a charitable cause. And she'd appreciate any reviews if you do buy the book on Amazon. The 80s are the reason we have global warming. All the hairspray, the hairnet. I mean, even the dudes back in the 80s were doing the hairspray. Do you guys remember that? When the dudes were doing the hair? Did you have? I never did that. I think I did the eyeliner. Even like back in the 80s, the dudes would do the eyeliner. I think there's a kid named Hayden in my neighborhood. He was all done up. He looked like David Lee Roth. He in the 8th grade, you thought he was David Lee Roth. He had the spandex, he had all the 80s gear, and he had the eyeliner. And one day he gave me some eyeliner and I put it in my eye. I came home, my mother was like, "What's on your eye, son?" No more eyeliner. No more eyeliner. Ruthie put an end to that. That was my mom. It's funny. Some of the stuff, like my mom, I hold it against her. She didn't let me play football. That was the one thing. The only thing I really hold against my mom is that she wouldn't sign the permission slip for me to play football. But everything else, like that stuff, I kind of laugh at because I'm like, yeah, she's right. Like I shouldn't have been wearing eyeliner. Like I'm like her now. I'm pretty conservative. I don't have any tattoos, no piercings, no eyeliner. We used to have this thing when our hair would get too long. She'd take us to the barber, and she'd go regular boy's haircut over the ear. Like you couldn't even have the hair feathered over the ear. But look how I wear it now. I wear it just like mom wanted it. I am a mama's boy. I rebelled hard, and now I'm just a friggin' mama's boy. It's funny. I do. Even when I like when COVID hit, I decided to let my hair grow long. That was the first time in my life I ever had long hair. Like I'm in my I don't know what 50s, late 40s, early 50s, and I'm finally have long hair. You think the eyeliner might help? Oh boy, Glenn, come on. I gotta go. We're talking about eyeliner and hair braids and hair bands and all this stuff. Look what you guys do to me. I have too much fun with the chat. Let's make spandex great again. You want a constant live jury? Sheila, you make a good point though. Because we talk about the baby boomers, how easy they had it. The '70s were a very tough time. You have a point. There was so much uncertainty, whether you're talking about nuclear weapons, but especially with the war. Sheila P says, I don't think people understand the stress that families went through in regards to Vietnam War, along with the assassination of JFK, just to mention a few. It's funny because I was born like right after the JFK stuff, and really like right in the middle of a lot of crazy shit. Like you look back, we keep talking about the political violence today. The political violence today is nothing compared to the '70s. Left wing violence, especially back then. You know how many bombings the left wing did in the '70s? It was crazy. Like the Weather Underground and all those other groups. It was a wild time. The '70s were insane. Early '70s. It was a very stressful time. It's true. It wasn't all easy for the boomers. That's true. Very true. And I gotta say for the boomers, they stood up. Like they, for all the people say about movements don't work, protest doesn't work. Well, it did work then. That war ended because of the baby boomers. So I respect all the generations. World War II generation, you have to respect big time. And the baby boomers too. I can remember when Elvis died. Do you remember when Elvis died? John Lennon. Those are like early memories I have of yeah. Fast Times. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You don't mention how many times I watched that movie at Bridgewater State. When we were at Bridgewater State, there was no cable television, and the TV reception sucked. We'd be basically stuck between Boston and Rhode Island. We'd be picking up some Rhode Island stations and some Boston stations, but you wouldn't get very good reception there back in the day. I'm sure it's better now because you get better antennas and all that. But a lot of times we would just watch the VHS tapes, and the one that we had was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So we watched that like every friggin' night. We'd watch it over and over and over again. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And that was even though it was a California high school. I can relate to Fast Times. That was like kind of my time frame. No, I like the millennials. I like all the kids. I like everybody. God bless the kids today. I have a lot of sympathy for kids today. Between social media that they have to deal with and the surveillance state where everything is seen and you're always on camera, and the economy and the cost of living. I feel bad for kids today. I do. And I find the kids today are actually very smart, very intelligent. And despite what they say, I think they're hardworking. I know a lot of older people say they don't work hard. I'm sure there's some kids who don't want to work, just like anything else. But I've met some hardworking young people. So yeah, 1977. I can remember where I was. I was riding down the hill of my friend's house, the McIsaac's Hill, on a bicycle. I remember one of them told me. I can remember specifically where I was when Elvis died because they were all bawling their eyes out. I'm like, who's Elvis? Like I didn't even know. You know, these kids were like, their dad was like the biggest Elvis fan of some shit. Yeah, I'd say like you said, between 63 to like 75. A very turbulent time in this country. Yeah, 63 was JFK. Now, even before that, too, like the Bay of Pigs, there's a lot of stuff going on from, I would say, like early 60s to like mid 70s. It was very turbulent times in this country. I'm headed out. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for supporting us. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. I want to thank again Carol for being here. I want to thank all the super chatters tonight. I want to thank everyone for keeping me company with the comments. And I also want to thank our moderators, MJ, Stephanie, Sarah, Scott McGinnis, and Jen O. Yeah, the Cold War fear mongering. Can you remember the last thing? Do you remember like they would play the videos and tell us to get under the desks and all that shit? Like it's funny because now the kids get drills on what happens in a school shooting. We used to get drills on what would we do if the Russians drop bombs on us. Now the kids get school shooting drills. I mean, geez, times have changed, huh? Oh, thank you, Sherry D. Oh, is Sherry D here right now? Do we agree? We did agree, right? Let me see if I can do it from here on Sherry D. I think I got something for Sherry D too tonight. Are we gonna? Are we doing this for Sherry? Let me ask Sarah. We did say yes, right? I'm speaking in code right now. Oh, there she is. All right. Let me see if I can do it from my phone. Sherry has no idea. We're gonna make you a mod tonight, Sherry D, on the Young Jerks. That's what the our mod team decided. Now I got it turned on. Hold on. We are gonna make you a mod. Look at me. You can hear me repeat it. I hold on. This is my last thing I'm doing. We're gonna add a new mod tonight, Sherry D. You have a wrench now, Sherry D. And that wasn't actually really decided by me, even though I said yes. Our mod team decided. They decided that they wanted to include you in that. And with our mod team, so sometimes people try to get in our on moderation on our mod team. It's not decided by me, it's decided by the mod team. They have to want you. So now you're part of the mod team. Unless you don't want it, then you can tell us no and we can take it away. But you have a wrench. I want to thank everyone. Congrats, Sherry D. Thank you so much for supporting us, and thank you to our mod team. I love you. I'm so thankful that you support me and take care of me and keep me out of trouble. The ladies in the chat, I just love you all. Thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll see you soon. Oh, one last thing. Next Friday, a week from tomorrow, I'll be back on the Grace Curley Show hosting next Friday. So make sure you check that out. WRKO, 6:80 a.m., 12 to 2 p.m. next Friday. Back on the Grace Curley Show hosting. It's always a fun time over there. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you check it out and call in. I want more callers. We finally got a caller over there when I was hosting. Sarah called in. I would love more callers, people to call in on the show next Friday when I'm there. So I'll see you over there next Friday, WRKO, 6:80 a.m. on the Grace Curley Show. And we'll see everyone here again. I'm not sure when my next live show for the Young Jerks will be, but stick around. You know how we do it. There'll be something upcoming. How do we call in on the Grace Curley Show? They have a telephone number. I'll get that. We'll figure it out. But yeah, well, I announced it too on the show. If you listen, it's WRKO 680 AM in Boston. You can also watch it live on Rumble, on the Grace Curley Show, Rumble, or on the Howie Carr Radio Network on the Facebook page they have there. And I do read out the number during the show, so it's very easy to call in if you're watching or listening. All right, have a good night, everyone. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Peace out.